afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you are having a good afternoon. We'll have plenty of news on the Browns as reportedly a new quarterback. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, Pro Bowl selections by team announced today. Ravens had the most with 9, Lions 7, Eagles and Vikings 6, Cowboys and Chiefs 5, Niners, Texans, and Steelers with 4 apiece, tied for 10th. Colts, Browns, Bengals, Broncos, Chargers, and Packers. So 3 playoff teams, 3 teams kind of on the cusp, and the Browns with 3 wins, all with 3 Pro Bowlers. Let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon. We'll show you this as well first. Browns also had 6 Pro Bowl alternates: Joel Bitonio, Corey Bojorquez, Nick Chubb, David Njoku, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and Wyatt Teller. Now let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report, All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, and the Barking Browns podcast. So Casey, you look at it, 3 starters, 6 alternates, 9 guys voted among the best. It's almost half of the roster. That is an indication that this team's 3 wins is an aberration. I know people, we've seen it. It's not pretty, but what it speaks to is that they've woefully underperformed.
Oh, without a doubt. When you see that many alternates, you know, the starters are a little different, the guys who get elected. And it's also important to keep in mind Pro Bowls are like 1/3 of a fan vote.
Right.
And for someone like Judy to be named a starter, he wasn't even in the top 10 in fan voting. That just shows you the respect he's garnered from the other 31 franchises to get to the point where he's a starter in this game. Just, you know, for the AFC, which is stacked, by the way, with other receivers. So in total, the Browns only had 2 players finish in the top 10 in voting, with Myles Garrett and Corey Bojorquez. So the fact that those other guys were named is just indicative of how the other 31 teams see the Browns roster and some of these players, and give them those kind of the recognition to be involved with the Pro Bowl.
Couple things come to mind. It shows you how important the quarterback position is in the NFL, and shows you how quickly things can change year over year.
Yeah, couldn't be more important. You couldn't put enough on the weight on the quarterback position and what it can do for your team, whether it's holding you down or you know, raising you up. And the Browns got inadequate quarterback play. So despite the talent on the roster, you still end up with a 3-win team, which is drastically lower than I thought it would be. I thought the floor of this team was 8 wins minimum. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they could descend to 3 wins shows you how important that one position is.
Well, you're being generous with inadequate. It was historically woeful. But, you know, we can use any adjectives, descriptives. So this comes as no surprise. There was a big article on ESPN kind of delineating the downfall from playoff team to competing for the number 1 overall pick, which the Browns are. Brown sources insist a tear-down rebuild is not coming. They note Barry, who declined to be interviewed for the story, is measured yet aggressive general manager, which has historically yielded plenty of offseason activity. Browns will be opportunistic in improving their roster as well. A personnel source said internally the Browns consider this offseason a pivot year with 8 big money contracts: David Njoku, Tomlinson, Conklin, and Wyatt Teller reaching the non-guaranteed stages in 2025. Browns also have 11 selections in the draft, including their first-round picks. It's 2021, which will be number 3 or higher with a loss to the Ravens. Again, until they figure out the quarterback position, it is what it is. But, yeah, the roster is not as bad as 3-14. It does need upgrading. I would argue you need to really infuse the offense with some talent.
Yeah, and it's tough to sell that to people right now, and I get it. Sitting at 3 wins, it's hard to hear, hey, you're closer than you think. But this whole thing's been coming all off season, you know, as we're looking ahead, and the word rebuild kept getting thrown in, and myself and others kept saying the word pivot. Like, you just look at the defensive side of the ball. You have several roster cornerstones. You're not that far off on that side of the ball. The offensive side needs retooled, no doubt, and that's what you're going to see in this 2025 offseason. And Barry is aggressive. That is something that they highlighted there, and I'd say most notably with trades, very opportunistic. If he sees a player sitting out there who's maybe in a contract year, and there's an opportunity there to get him, best believe they're going to be sending a 5th-round pick and swapping 6, and it'll be a low cost, high reward type situation if it works. But he's not afraid to take those swings, and those players are always out there. So do expect Barry to be aggressive, and they understand their feet are to the fire. You know, they're not going to go down quietly. They don't have time for a full rebuild. They're going to retool some things and their approach, some of their personnel. Some of these guys are aging out. They're going to have to restock the cupboard in the offensive line. There's things that must happen before you can enter the 2025 season, but they're going to check all those boxes, and Barry will be aggressive in doing so.
All right, Mike Tannenbaum, former general manager with a couple NFL teams, on his prediction for the Browns in 2025, ESPN's First Take.
Kirk Cousins will lead the Browns to the AFC North division title. And to me, this one's really easy because you reunite with Kevin Stefanski. They need a quarterback. They have a really good defense. And if Kirk Cousins plays B or better, they win the division.
What? Like, he was going to join and be what? Maybe the 3rd best quarterback in that division? He couldn't finish this with the Falcons. Like, what are we talking about? Kirk Cousins? Like, what do the Browns need more than one expensive quarterback that they can't play? Is another expensive quarterback that they can't play? Like, what are we talking about?
And to my point, I said the Browns was going to have Kirk Cousins. I didn't say he was going to win the division. I just said they need to add another guy that can go out there and compete with Deshaun Watson. I didn't say he was going to go win the division now, Mike. You was on your own with that one.
Casey, it's important to note, he isn't going to be expensive. He has a no-trade clause. He can force his way out of Atlanta and sign a Russell Wilson $1.26 million a year deal. So he ain't going to be expensive. The question is he healthy? And what was his relationship with Kevin Stefanski like? We assume it was good because he had a great year.
Yes.
We don't know that for a fact, though.
I've been on that exact same point. Like, they did have success together. Cousins was his most efficient year under Stefanski, but that doesn't mean the working relationship was great. We don't know that. What will tell us that is if he forces his way out and immediately comes to Cleveland, those questions will have been answered. But because of what we saw last offseason with the Russell Wilson, Denver cutting bait, having to pay his salary, signs vet minimum with Pittsburgh, it's worked out to a degree. So if you're a team looking just to elevate your quarterback play to raise your floor, I think there'll be a market for Kirk Cousins in that regard. There's such a quarterback hungry league, and the draft doesn't supply a lot of them this year. So the fact that he could possibly become available and cheap, the Browns will be the only people vying for his services, so that if he ends up in Cleveland, that would answer the question about him and Kevin Stefanski's working relationship. I just want to push back on this compete with Deshaun Watson narrative. Did everybody miss the part where his Achilles snapped on television? Did you see that? There's no competing. He's not competing in training camp. He'll be on the pup. That's just the way this is going to go. So I don't think you're bringing someone to compete with Deshaun Watson at the beginning of the season. Now, if Watson gets healthy and things get wonky, could they see him back to the field? Possibly. But I think if you can bring in a Kirk Cousins, great. Draft a guy, bring in another free agent. The Browns are at a point now, they just got to throw as much at the wall as possible. Cast the widest net. Bring in 4, bring in 5 quarterbacks. You can't have enough until you find your field general of the future.
All right, so this is interesting as well. Top 7 players receiving yardage this season. They were all first-round picks. Now, this was prior to Monday night's game. Monday night, Amon-Ra St. Brown played and entered that top 4. He's got 1,186 yards. He was a 4th-round pick, and that year the Browns took Anthony Schwartz in the 3rd round. So I say that so you realize it. But the Browns, the last time the Browns invested a first-round pick in a wide receiver in a passing league was Corey Coleman. Now, you did go out and you got Jerry Jeudy, but it's been Anthony Schwartz in the 3rd, Cedric Tillman in the 3rd. Give me a 1st or 2nd round wide receiver. Give whoever you're asking to play quarterback a playmaker, please.
And the guys that are always at the top of this list are usually 1st or 2nd round picks at that position.
Yep.
And it's usually a pretty deep class just because these kids are playing 7-on-7s throughout high school like it's AAU. So they come in more polished than ever. You see 3 rookies on that list right there. That just shows you how quickly you can acclimate if you're a top tier talent coming into the league. And when I'm looking at this draft, I have my eye on 2 of them, and they'll both be available in round 1 when the Browns pick. And I could even foresee a world where you trade back and end up with one of these guys. But Jerry Jeudy did phenomenal. Cedric Tillman showed some flashes, but I don't let either of those things stop me from bringing in yet another playmaker in a passing league, especially one with a differentiating body type like a Teratoa McMillan or even Luther Burden. There's talent out there, and I'm with you. Stack as much of it as possible because that makes life for whoever you bring in to play quarterback a lot easier.
Get somebody who you get the ball in his hands and the defense goes, how are we going to stop him? Well, we reports are coming out that we will have a new starting quarterback. Mary Kay Cabot, time to haul out the infamous Browns jersey. Add Bailey Zappe's name as the 40th quarterback to start a game for them since 1999. He will get the start against the Baltimore Ravens. At this point, why not?
It used to be a time-honored tradition that whoever your last quarterback was, he was going to start the regular season finale. So you might as well. I'm not saying we know exactly what Dorian Thompson Robinson is, but we know that he's not ready. That's what we can say from these last 2 starts. The game still appeared to be too fast. He was rushing through his processes, leaving plays all over the field. So, go bring another guy in, see what he looks like, see what the receivers look like with him in there, how he controls the huddle. Things that you can think from practice that you don't find out until there's live bullets. Well, this is the last opportunity for live bullets. So get a good long look at Bailey Zappe before we go in the offseason and see if he's someone you want to bring, keep with the franchise, maybe compete for that last quarterback spot. But yeah, this is a position we've been in way too many times over the years, and I felt like we'd kind of shifted away from it. But here we are, Bailey Zappe time.
Yep. What would it be to be a Browns fan without having questions about your quarterback? Casey Kinnamon and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from the Orange and Brown Report, the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, as well as the Barking Browns podcast. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. Watching the show about the quarterbacks. I'm with you. I don't see no one impressive in here for the top 3 pick. Can we drop down, or where do we have to stay at number 3? Is there any good, solid stud lineman out there that's worthy of that pick? Keep me posted on that. Thank you. Have a good one, bro. God bless you. I love you.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Casey, we'll get into some of the specifics a little later in the show. There isn't really a lineman that is rated as, can't miss, all pro, take him in the top 5. And I'm intrigued by Shedeur Sanders. I don't know that I'd take him even if he was there at number 3. I'm passing on Cam Ward. I've seen 2 or 3 games of his. There's a lot. He's talented. There's a lot of things that need tweaking.
We've touched on this in the past. Sometimes being bad isn't enough. It's being bad in the right year.
Yep.
And you think back to the 2020 draft with Cincinnati, ended up with the first pick, and it completely changed their fortunes because they were bad in the right year. This feels like the wrong year to be bad if you're trying to snag a quarterback. I look at the 2 top prospects. I look at Shedeur Sanders as a high floor, low ceiling type of guy. And if you're drafting a guy with that high of a pick, and you'd think the ceiling for him is a top 20 quarterback, that's hard to swallow, and Cam Ward is a little different for me because his ceiling is high. His ceiling is elite level high, but his floor it's scary. There's a lot of wow plays, but there's also a lot of WTF plays. And sometimes you think a player like that, maybe the organization thinks they could coach that out of him. But we're talking about a player who had 3 different systems and from Incarnate Word to Washington State to Miami, and that's a lot of different voices, and those flaws kind of stayed with him throughout all those stops. So it feels risky to me. I know a lot of people like the ceiling of Cam Ward, but I would be worried about it. And if I'm just looking at the way this falls right now, and say you end up at third, I think you trade back.
Yeah,
I do. I don't, because you don't have a Joe Alt.
No,
You don't have an automatic guy that people are going to come up get position wise. So scoop assets, trade a bad team. Hope you get lined up next year with one of those top 5 picks.
try to acquire. If somebody wants to give you a number one to move up a couple spots into your slot, because you can trade back probably into the top 10, 12, and still get one of the best offensive tackles in this draft. Or if you find somebody that can make an immediate impact for your team, that's what you need from that first round pick. Has to be able to play. Has to be at home. You need a guy that's at an all-pro level in 2-3 years. Somebody that you can plug in and play. This is from CBS Sports. Players whose stock sank in a contract year. They go with Nick Chubb, 332 yards, 102 carries, 3 touchdowns, 8 games before he broke his foot. 3.3 yards per carry, well below the 5.3. Base value of his contract was 2.05. Incentives increased the actual compensation to 3.7. Chubb signing an incentive-laden 1-year deal on the open market where the base value is in the same neighborhood wouldn't surprise. I think the Browns would sign up for that immediately if they want to do that. Incentive-laden around that, the Browns would love to have him back. The flip side of that is the draft is considered to be very deep at running back, and Jerome Ford is fine as a change of pace. I think we can both agree. I've seen enough. I don't want to build a run game around him.
Yeah, he can't be the bell cow. He can't be your lead back getting, 10 to 15 touches a game. That's just not who he is as a player. Now, he's got a specific skill set. He's different than Nick. Nick is a zone, find the cutback lane, burst through and break. Ford kind of needs those rushing lanes to be like identified for him, like a pin pull type of guy. Because if he has a clear lane, he can go from 2nd to 5th gear and really pull away from people, but he can't run through the traffic and get through unscathed and run through contact and still kind of break those big plays like that. So he's a different type of running back. Now, he catches the ball well, but his pass protection scares me. So you can't make him a full-time third down back either. So he is that change of pace back. And I'm with you. I think the Browns would definitely sign up, bring Chubb back on an incentive deal. We always talk about it's not the year you return, it's the year after, especially when we're talking about a devastating knee injury like he had. That's the reason I was sad that he had to go out on the broken foot, because if anyone needed to reach the offseason fully healthy, it was Nick Chubb, just to give him that full runway to get back to whatever he can show you he has left in the tank. But just the same as it was 2 years ago, this is a very deep running back draft, and you're going to find starting caliber players littered throughout, literally first round to 7th round. There's going to be players available that have that kind of ceiling. Now, some might be 2-3 years down the line, but some of these guys are ready to go right out of the box. So it just depends on what they're looking for, what they're willing to spend on that position. The last time they picked a running back in the 2nd round was Nick Chubb. So it's been a while since they've taken a big swing. I don't know if I anticipate that, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if it was around 3 or around 4 back. And there's going to be plenty of guys in that atmosphere right there that are going to be able to contribute as a rookie, and then probably be a lead back year 2, year 3. So I think that's what you're looking at this year.
All right, this from ESPN. NFL Power Rankings, every team's contract situation to watch. Chiefs are 1, Lions 2, Bills 3. Browns are 29th. Biggest offseason contract situation to watch, Myles Garrett. Garrett, 2 years remaining on a 5-year extension he signed in 2020. No more guaranteed salary. With another 14-sack season on his resume, would appear the right time for a new deal. Again, places him highest paid pass rushers in the NFL. In recent weeks, he has voiced his plan to see Browns offseason plans before further committing to the organization. When I heard that, what he's telling them is, I don't want to overhaul the roster. When a player of his ilk comes out and says that, what he's saying is, I want to know, tell me you're not planning on tearing it down to the studs again, because I've seen that. I don't want to go through that. I'm too old to go through that again, which kind of makes you think he wants Stefanski and Barry back, because if you don't want to tear it down, you want to add to the roster that you have.
And I'm so glad that he did that, though. I in my opinion, if your best player can't come out and raise the expectations and be the standard bearer and tell you what he expects, then who could? You know. So if you were listing all the assets the Browns have, number one's Myles Garrett. Like, to me, that's so you build around that. That is a generational player. You're seeing the list that he's starting to get on. You know, is with Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor, and it's because of his consistency. His, year over year, you can count on him to be that guy, and you build around that type of player. So I'm glad he's holding their feet to the fire. And when we hear in this ESPN article that they're not trying to rebuild, they are trying to pivot. They're going to keep what they have in place on defense and try to build to it. That's the kind of stuff you need to be able to tell Myles Garrett. And the one thing that was kind of really emphasized on me during his press conference when he was breaking this all down is he needs to feel confident who the quarterback is.
Yep.
Which leads me to believe that he doesn't believe the guy that's on the roster is the answer. Or you wouldn't be talking like that. So for me, it's you got to make him feel comfortable that you're going to be able to put something together on the opposite side of the football that can help the defense out. That's going to give them time to rest. That's going to put up points on the board, and he wants to hear that plan. And I think he's owed that. And I might catch heat for this, but I wish Joe Thomas would have had a little more of that in him. You know, as good as he was, just let him know what your standard is, and you guys have to meet this in order for me to be happy with where I'm at. Now, Garrett's a little different with 2 years left on his deal. The guaranteed money's gone, and I expect him to rework something probably this offseason. But if they have to have those conversations first, that's a good thing, because I want him to feel good about where he's at in this spot in his career. And they need to bring something on the offensive side of the ball and just to complement this defense, because if not, man, this is just, it's going to be lopsided. So I'm glad Myles took the stance that he did.
Casey Kinnamon and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, guys, this is about Deshaun Watson. He was coming off shoulder surgery last year, okay? And he hasn't been healthy. He hasn't played well enough, but I think that he was scared to throw the ball downfield coming off shoulder surgery, and he was already dealing with his complications from the shoulder surgery he had last year. So he was scared to throw the ball downfield. You saw when he was just freezing the pocket, looking scared to throw the ball downfield. Yeah, because he didn't trust his offensive line, and he didn't trust his surgically repaired shoulder. So he didn't have any confidence throwing the ball downfield at times. So hopefully when we see him again, he will be back next year because we're stuck with him. He just gets some confidence and with a better line and protection and get ready to play, and he'll be better and go from there. That's all I got to say. You guys have a good one. Go Browns, and Happy New Year. Take care now. Bye-bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Casey, he's going to be coming off an Achilles injury, so that's going to really his ability was to scramble kind of playoff platform. A little bit older, shoulder, Achilles. And to your point, probably not going to be ready for training camp, although we'll see. They've done some good things with Achilles, but you can't count on them. You just can't count on them. If you want to put him in there and let him compete, it's got to be a level playing field, though. I would give him no break, and to be honest with you, I'd make it Kevin Stefanski's offense. We can't build an offense around a guy that we don't know. It's now been 2 major injuries.
Yeah, I can't discount the caller's point, with the shoulder surgery, not having the confidence to let it rip deep. But I can tell you from watching the film, that isn't all it is. He wasn't seeing the field. He was bailing on clean pockets. It wasn't just a lack of protection. There was so many factors going into it, and there was that hesitancy to pull the trigger, even when guys were open. And then sometimes you wonder if he even saw the guys that were open. So there's just too many factors going into this. And then you add the injuries. And to your point, like the things that made him special while he was in Houston, where the stuff that was open, he could take it, not a problem. But when things would break down, he could use his athleticism, escape, and still make things happen. We saw that diminish. And if that's going to be the X factor, I can't imagine that's better after an Achilles injury. To me, And if it is, it'll be 2 years, 3 years from now. So the Browns aren't afforded that time. This front office is not afforded that time. So that can't be their plan. It's not an option. When you hear players coming out wanting to know the plan and who the quarterback's going to be, it's obvious they don't believe in the quarterback that is there. So you got to, all systems go. You got to find the guy, regardless of who's on your roster at this time and who you consider yourself stuck with. So it's about throwing as much at the wall as possible and not trying to build around one specific player, especially if you can't count on them. So I think that's just the spot that they're in now. He's going to be rehabbing. He'll be a story because people will make it a story. He won't be a story because of the team, the organization. They're not going to rely on him to be bailing them out. They have to find another option, 2 or 3, to be honest with you. That's just the way this league is, because until you have the guy, you're just searching. So the Browns are going to be in that spot now, even with him on the roster.
Do you expect dramatic changes again to the offensive staff? And if you had a voice in it, would you, and what would you move towards?
Yeah, absolutely. There has to be. You can't look at this lack of offensive success and just say status quo, all systems go. We're going to go right back into the fray with this exact group. And I'm not, this isn't consensus, especially at the OBR. There's plenty of people that believe that Ken Dorsey will be back. I am not among those. I believe he was brought here to be the quarterback whisperer for Deshaun Watson. That took a turn, and we've seen where that took us. So if you're, and especially if you consider, I'm not going to say that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are on the hot seat, because I don't believe in bringing people back who are on the hot seat. You might as well fire them. But we can't kid ourselves and say they could turn in another 3, 5, 6 win season and be okay. They know that they have to win. And if I'm Kevin Stefanski, and there's a chance I could be going out, I'm going out on my own sword. I'm going to do what I do. And I just think that's the natural inclination, is to kind of revert back to what he knows. Now, we were talking before the 24 season, before they hired Ken Dorsey, that there needed to be a revision to the Kevin Stefanski offense. The lack of motion, the pre-snap window dressing, stuff like that wasn't present in Stefanski's offense. They need to incorporate that. But I would be much more inclined to let Dorsey go, probably Dickerson as well, considering the lack of success on the offensive line, and bring some other voices in. But I want them to be voices that are married to what Kevin Stefanski does. If whoever takes the job in New Orleans, let's go with Clint Kubiak, that's my first phone call. Bringing him in, kind of getting back with that, the pre-snap stuff, the misdirection, but stay in the pocket of what Stefanski knows, because you can win with that. And you can win with that without elite quarterback play, which is more likely what they're going to be dealing with in 25 and maybe even 26. So that's where I'd pivot to. I would get some voices who speak Stefanski's language, and I would build from there.
So my question would be to anybody that disagrees with I'm with you. I think they should. If you completely change the staff after an 11-win season, why would you stick with that staff after a 3-win season? If you can answer that question, I'd love to hear it. Casey, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Casey.
Anytime, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Casey Kinnamon, make sure you check him out. Writes for the Orange and Brown Report, also co-host of the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast and the Barking Browns podcast. We're going to take a quick time out. Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst, co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Head.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio lotteries home for the holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. Can you bring up the top 5 offensive linemen and the top 5 defensive linemen in this upcoming draft? What's the sense of getting a quarterback if we can't keep them upright? We need to start rebuilding this offensive line. I think Zach Zenner got his feet wet this year to see how he pans out. But tell me what you think. Love you, brother. Have a good one. God bless you and the family.
All of the voicemail. So here are the offensive linemen. We'll limit it to this for now. You can see, and the overall rankings are from PFF. Will Campbell from LSU, 11th, same as Kelvin Banks from Texas. We'll see him against Ohio State coming up. Josh Simmons from Ohio State, 15th, and the top 2 guards substantially lower, just position value. Tyler Booker from Alabama is 65th, and Donovan Jackson, another Ohio State Buckeye, ranked 84th. Let's welcome in Dalton Wasserman, PFF analyst, co-host of the PFF College Football Show. So, Dalton, the tackles, are any of those guys day one starters, big-time contributors, guys that can develop into Pro Bowlers pretty quickly?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at this offensive line class, it leans a lot towards the tackles. I think it's a weaker interior class. You mentioned Booker and Donovan Jackson as a couple of good players that I think are day 2 prospects. But as far as where the Browns are going to be picking, you're looking at those first 2 guys, Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks Jr., right, from LSU and Texas, respectively. Campbell, just a really sound football player. I don't know if it's quite on the level of Joe Alt from last year, coming out of Notre Dame, and now he's playing great for the Chargers. But very sound football player. Only really the elite rushers and college football gave him problems over the last 3 years. And then Banks, a terrific athlete, an excellent run blocker, an absolute mauler, especially when it comes to the zone game. A guy who I think really would fit in Kevin Stefanski's system very well when you consider all of those stretch schemes that he's trying to run, and also an excellent athlete in pass protection. There's just a little bit, sometimes some inconsistencies, but they're both fantastic football players. I think the range the Browns are going to be picking in, they're looking at those 2 guys. They could both be Pro Bowl type players.
All right, so take a look at this. So Browns 3-13. They currently would be 3rd overall in the NFL draft with their latest loss. They conclude the season against the Ravens, who clinched the AFC North with a win. Cleveland loss, wins by just the Patriots and the Titans, facing teams that will be resting starters, would clinch the number 1 overall pick for the Browns. Is there any quarterback that you look at, so Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, that you would pick number 1 overall and think this is the guy, or is this the year to trade back and maybe accumulate some assets?
It's a tough evaluation because I think either one of them could be worth it. They're clearly the 2 best quarterbacks in this draft. They're a little bit different stylistically when you talk about Sanders, kind of a classic pocket quarterback. He's accurate. He reads defense as well. He gets the ball out generally on time, takes a few too many sacks, but I think that's because he was asked to do so much and carry so much at Colorado. And Ward's a little bit of a gunslinger, kind of in the style, I think, of Caleb Williams a little bit from last year. But I think you could take either one of them first overall if you felt good enough about it. Now, you don't want to force it either. If you feel like that's your guy, then cool, go ahead and take him and build around the rest of it later. But the Browns don't feel enough conviction with the first overall pick, or if there's somebody else that doesn't feel enough conviction with that first overall pick, you have Sanders' teammate Travis Hunter as an option. I think a trade down would really help the Browns when you look at how much they need across their roster. So I do think they have a lot of options, but I think both of those guys are worth that pick, and it's just a matter of the team's preference and what they're looking for in a quarterback.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about college football. Takeaways from Ohio State's first 2 games, impressive wins against Tennessee and Oregon.
they have fully embraced, despite the flaws on their offensive line, which are still there. They're not a great run in between the tackles team because of the injuries up front. Chip Kelly has fully embraced what this offense is. It's perimeter, getting the ball to the outside, fast tempo. We've obviously seen what Jeremiah Smith can do. He's an absolute freak, but I think everything now is working to the outside and stretching the width of the field first, throwing to the outside, running to the edges off tackle, and using all of the space and all of these dynamic athletes that Ohio State has. I think Chip Kelly finally in these last 2 games has fully embraced from the start of the game, we're going to open this thing up, we're going to air it out, and we won't run until the safeties respect our receivers, which they should because we have the best pair of receivers in college football. I think it's just been a total transformation. There was moments where they showed it this season. I think about the Penn State game, the Indiana game, but now they've become a team that wants to get the ball to the outside and succeed in space.
Is it sustainable? Is that something they can keep doing? You know, you have Texas and then whomever if they're able to get by Texas. Is that style sustainable?
I think it is because their offensive line is playing at least well enough. And from this group that's out there with several injuries up front, that's all you're asking for, right? I think you're asking for at least if this offensive line plays at an average level, they can absolutely win a national title. Obviously, the flaw is winning between the tackles, but they've gone away from it. They understand the strengths of their team. I think it is. And Texas is going to be their toughest task yet. I think Texas has the best secondary in the country. So when you talk about raging hot Will Howard plus Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka and all the other weapons in the passing game, this will be their toughest test yet because, you know, you have the Thorpe Award winner and Jahdae Barron. You've got Michael Taff and Andrew Makuba at safety. They have great players. They're the best coverage team in the nation so far. It's going to be their toughest task, and if they get by it, I really like their chances to win the whole thing.
So if Ohio State, who's been the most impressive team in the college football playoffs? If you say Ohio State, who's the next most impressive?
I think it's been Texas, and I was even really impressed with the way Arizona State played against them. I think Texas going through some adversity in these first 2 games. I know that it's a little bit inconsistent at times on offense, but you have to be impressed with the way Quinn Ewers played late in the fourth quarter and overtime. Matt Golden at receiver really emerging, and I think for long stretches of these games, their defense is just taking it over, right? It's one of the best defenses. We may be watching the 2 best defenses in college football playing each other in Texas and Ohio State, but I think they've looked good. They've gone through a little bit of adversity. They've had to work out the kinks of some of their flaws, especially on offense, but they found a way to get through and come through in big moments, and I think we got a fantastic matchup coming in the semis.
All right, before I let you go, what's going to determine it? Who comes out a winner between Ohio State and Texas?
Which quarterback avoids the mistakes? And Will Howard, except for the Michigan game, has avoided mistakes all season. And Quinn Ewers, it's been a little more inconsistent. Jim Knowles, Ohio State's defensive coordinator, has been messing around with their coverages a little bit when they're playing these wide open offenses like Tennessee, like Oregon, and Texas is going to be the same way. So I think it's really about, if there's one guy I think it's about, it's Quinn Ewers. I think he was good and bad in some moments against Arizona State. He's kind of been up and down all season. Turnovers can come in spurts. He has to avoid mistakes and play at a high level, even NFL processor level in the pocket to read Ohio State's coverages, or he could have a real problem.
Dalton Wasserman, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Dalton.
Appreciate it as always, Dave. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Dalton Wasserman, make sure you check him out. He's co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Always really good stuff. He is a PFF data analyst. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. To other side of the break, Lance Reisland, film breakdown, video analysis, what the Buckeyes did against Oregon to get that win yesterday. Sports4CLE will be right back.
Head.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Ohio State football here on Sports4CLE. Let's welcome in Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's take a film breakdown video analysis of the Buckeyes against Oregon. And Lance, again, it was an impressive performance, and really they had that game well in hand by the time halftime reached. But We had talked a couple of things they needed to do, and they certainly checked all the boxes. First thing when we did it as the keys to Ohio State winning, limit chunk plays, and they certainly did. Dylan Gabriel he did not have time.
Well, if you take a look here, so you're going to see the ability to take that middle of the field between the hashes. So a couple of things that they did. So this was a 4th down and 3. They did a really nice job. You can see as the play rewinds a couple times, you're going to see Oregon is going to do a crossing, what we like to call mesh. Everybody runs it at all levels. And basically what you're getting receivers that are crossing each other. These type of routes have hurt the Buckeyes, and they've been great for the Oregon Ducks. Now, the thing that I saw that I really, really liked out of the Buckeyes is, they kind of took what happened in the first one and they said, we're going to fix that, or they're going to have to do something else. And Oregon didn't have an answer. So Caleb Downs, Ransom, they did a great job of dropping into that hole. And you and I have talked about that with what teams are doing to the Browns. And as this play starts, you're going to see right at the bottom of the rows, you're going to see Caleb Downs kind of turn his numbers and look. And what they're doing is they're looking for guys coming in the middle field, crossers, slants, digs, things that Oregon does very well. They didn't have an answer for it. And then they created pressure. But it all started with eliminating these chunk plays. They averaged 14.8 that first meeting, just around 7 in the second meeting. Really outstanding job by the defensive staff at Ohio State.
Yeah, without question. So they cut it in half from 14.8 to 7.3. The other thing, step 2 that you had, create pressure on Gabriel. They definitely did that. He had really no time to throw pretty much all game long.
We're going to see here, here's great job taking away the crossers, then he has nowhere to go. Now, I will, the scouting report that you and I had discussed was really hit every aspect, but I'll tell you what, I got to give Ohio State's defensive line a lot of credit. In that first meeting when they brought 4, they were unable to create pressure. These guys, this front 4 that has a lot of pros on it, they created a lot of pressure, which made it even harder for Gabriel because then the Buckeyes could cover with 7. So this was super impressive. Oregon had given up 13 sacks all season. They gave up 8. And a lot of those, there were some 5- and 6-man pressures. They did some sim pressures that we had talked about last week. But you got to give a lot of credit to these 4-down linemen from Ohio State. They created pressure, which allowed the secondary to play with 7 and handle all those Oregon Ducks. Again, really well done. They created some matchups. Well done by the Buckeyes and their defensive staff and that defensive line.
Yeah, the other thing they did is they had somebody kind of spying on Gabriel, making sure they didn't allow him to run through the defense. So that I agree with you. That was a great job by the defensive unit. The other thing, it seems so simple when we say it, create touches for Smith. The freshman is a player without question.
Well, if you think about Mbuk, so first thing you get here is they put him up top and they run a little submarine. Everybody has a different call for it. I used to call it submarine where he's coming underneath the coverage. And what happened was they got caught up in coverage. Now, this next one, you're going to get a couple different angles here. This is actually not a really good read by Will Howard, but I like to throw because players overplays. So you're going to see it from this different angle. You're going to see it's a smash concept. It's a high-low, and you're going to see the corner drop on Smith. But Howard says, I don't care. So you're going to see the motion by tight end, and you're going to see that corner start sprinting towards Smith. So in all honesty, Will Howard should check that down to the underneath route. But I don't blame him from throwing it to a guy. Sometimes you go into Ohio State and he says you win with people, and it's really simple. Sometimes you just got to have your best players touch the ball. You got to force feed those best players. On every call sheet, on every offensive coordinator at every level, there's a touch, meaning there's guys who have to touch the ball regardless. Jeremiah Smith is a generational player. He's a guy who this year I think would be the first pick in the draft, and he just gives you such flexibility, and he's impossible to cover. And Chip Kelly's done a great job of moving him around and putting him in motion and putting him in different spots and different personnel groups. Again, as they move towards Texas, they got to continue. Texas will do a nice job of kind of trying to corral him. They're going to have to do another good job of putting him in different spots. But awesome job by Chip Kelly. Sometimes it's just you just have better players. And as a coach, I never cared about losing to a team that had better players. Ohio State had better players yesterday.
Yeah, and you know what? Remember that is a freshman, so he is about 218 pounds, and they're going to beef him up. And whenever he comes out, he is going to be one heck of an NFL wide. He will continue the tradition and the legacy. Lance, the other thing that steps up, Ohio State has played so much better. And I've seen every college football playoff game from beginning to end. Some of them have been painful. They have played so much better than the rest of the field. If they come out and play like they have the first half of each of these two games, good luck finding a way to beat them.
Well, here's the thing as a coach. So Ryan Day, now everybody gets on Ryan Day. We got to give credit where credit's due. These guys have been well prepared after the Michigan loss. And you and I had talked about it leading up to the Michigan game. They had put such stress on Michigan that impacts how you practice. That impacts how you talk to your players. That impacts how you talk to your coaches, how you prepare, all that stuff. They've played free and easy, and there's no question their roster is as good, most likely better than everybody they play. Now, Texas is going to be a little bit more physical on the defensive side. Their front seven, as I start breaking that film down this morning, their front seven's very, very physical and a ton of NFL talent. The Buckeyes have to stay with what they do. The Buckeyes, they ran the ball really well yesterday, but they ran the ball, as we talked about, because they threw it well early. And when you throw it well early, you loosen that box, and then you can run the ball with your two really good tailbacks. This is a pass-first offense that relies on skill and talent, and then they can get into the run game. That's what they decided to do. They lost that mentality that they had against Michigan, and when they do like they've done, they're a tough out. There's no question.
I'm with you. Get the ball to those guys in space and let the defense try to figure out how to make sure they're not running by them. Lance Reisland, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Lance.
As always, thanks for having me.
Lance Reisland, make sure you check him out. Always really good film breakdown, video analysis, Buckeyes, Browns, NFL. Make sure you check him out, cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. We're going to turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter, straight ahead on Sports4CLE. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers, getting ready to wrap up their road trip in Dallas tomorrow. Back-to-back wins out west against Golden State and the Los Angeles Lakers. Lakers legend James Worthy on what he has seen from Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs.
He's putting up, and he's shutting up and he's putting up, and he's got a great group around him, and he knows it. And Donovan he's a freak of nature, man. This guy's he's big, he has big hands, big feet. He's very solid. The way he was knocking down threes tonight looked like free throws. And he doesn't really have to do a lot, unless he's called upon, because of the chemistry that they have and because of the other guys that do so much. He's a superstar that's just waiting to explode when he has to with this team. He does a lot of little things. Make sure that the team is a team. He keeps the chemistry going. That's leadership.
Talking to Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. And Ethan, when a guy like James Worthy recognizes that, it's pretty good.
I got to agree with the legend, right? We talk about why this team has been so good to start the season, why the Cavs are 29-4 and on a 72-game win pace. It's because of the selflessness of this team. I mean, there's three big reasons to me: selflessness, continuous adjustments on the fly by Kenny Atkinson and his staff, and the joy that also James Worthy mentioned when you talk about the chemistry and camaraderie. You can look at the core four, and two of the most important players on the team have taken a step back for the Cavs' success, starting with Jared Allen, because we know what Donovan Mitchell has done. Jared Allen has not only accepted that he'd have to split center minutes for the benefit of the Cavs with Evan Mobley, but also that to win certain games, he'd find himself on the bench in closing minutes, depending on how the opposing team is playing and what the game calls for. Then the 5-time All-Star in Donovan Mitchell has sacrificed for everyone. He's taken on the spotlight over the previous 2 seasons to allow Evan Mobley to develop kind of in the shadows until he was ready for his full evolution and to be brought to the forefront, in which we've seen this season. He has also been paired with Evan Mobley more this year, which is a change Atkinson has made for his rotations from what we've seen in previous seasons, and Donovan has pushed Evan Mobley to take more shots, even tougher shots, bring the ball up the floor, and not to shy away from the moment. When the franchise face is telling you to be more aggressive and do your thing, it gives a newfound confidence to these guys, and he's done that for everybody, but especially for Evan Mobley in the development we've seen this season. This also doesn't touch on how Donovan has breathed confidence into Darius Garland and Jared Allen, but especially Darius looking back to last year when he was being counted out by everyone and Donovan never turned his back on him, his running mate. The other two are more simple. Kenny Atkinson isn't solely looking to his stars for productivity. If the stars are struggling, he's quickly subbing them out and putting the bench in to give them a chance to jolt the Cavs back into games, and it has worked. This will benefit them in the long run as well as during the regular season. And then the Cavs are arguably the most fun team in the NBA to be around and to watch play, whether you're talking about the post-game interviews in the locker room where they're goofing off and getting on each other in a positive, fun way, or how they celebrate each other's successes on the court with their many celebrations.
So that's how they're 29-4. Take a look at this. This is from ESPN, the NBA on ESPN. Cavs now 29-4, only teams with a better winning percentage entering the new year over the last 30 seasons. The 15-16 Lakers made the NBA Finals. The 07-08 Celtics won the NBA Finals. 95-96 Bulls won the NBA Finals. So when you look at that in terms of how good they've been, it's about time to start saying they're legitimate title contenders.
I mean, we've been having this conversation, right? Me and you, we've been knowing, we've been having this conversation. It's nothing new, but now the league is starting to understand it. GMs, other people, other smarter people than you and I, especially smarter than me, have been saying this. And it's come down to it, and I've said it since the beginning of the season. I have the OKC Thunder and the Cleveland Cavaliers as the best matchup in the NBA Finals, and the only team that stands in the way of the Cleveland Cavaliers is the Boston Celtics. And if the Cleveland Cavaliers can continue this pace and end up with the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference, well, then they don't have to play Boston until the Eastern Conference Finals, which would be a rematch, but that's one of the things that we love about this game. And you talk about how the history stacks up with all of the teams that have started this way, have made it to the NBA Finals at least. And this is also the best team record in Cavs history to this point in the season. So we want to talk about how this team is starting to build its own legacy and continuing to break records that show not only how good they've been together, but how far they've come in their development, because we know just how far this team was 4 years ago.
So I know you've addressed this on the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Who does Kenny Atkinson's coaching style mimic the most and remind you of the most?
I mean, you talk about a coaching tree that he has been a part of that is phenomenal. Mike D'Antoni, Bud, Steve Kerr, Ty Lue, all these different guys that he's been able to pick and pull different ideas and coaching styles from. But when you talk about what this Cleveland Cavaliers team has been able to do this season, there's one guy that stands out the most, and that's Steve Kerr, the guy that Kenny Atkinson coached alongside for 3 seasons in Golden State when they won a championship. And it might not just be because of the style of play that they're playing, constantly moving bodies as well as getting the ball up the floor, shooting more threes, all those different things, different pace, those different things. But it's also how Kenny Atkinson is running this team behind the scenes, right? The element of joy that we talked about earlier in this show, it's more of making sure that they are doing things that are going to elevate them on the floor, but also making sure that they're not going to be worn out when it comes to game 82 in the season. So that means bringing funny videos or mistakes that were made and doing a low light reel before practice, or they played a multitude of sports not related to the game of basketball this season. Pickleball, dodgeball, football, you name it, they probably played it. So being able to separate the game of basketball and then also just understanding that it is that a game and having fun with it and being able to stretch out what they've been able to do this season, it just shows that Kenny is tapping into every different element that he's learned from his coaching career, and Steve Kerr is a big part of that.
So we're probably 6-7 weeks away from the NBA All-Star game. How many All-Stars do you think the Cavs could legitimately have this season?
So the fan vote first came out today. The first fan return came out today, and it's looking good for at least 2 of the Cleveland Cavaliers players. That's where we're standing right now. Donovan Mitchell is second on that list in guards for the Eastern Conference, only behind LaMelo Ball. Donovan has 718,000 votes already, so he's second on that list. And then when you look at the front court, Evan Mobley, a guy that we talked a lot about on this show, is 10th. He has the final voting. He's final on the voting list for the first fan return. He has 145,623 votes. And I think when you talk about what the Cavs deserve to have because of the season that they're having, you could argue that all 4 of the core 4 should be there, at least Darius Garland. But when you look at this guards list that's on the first fan return and all the different information that we have, LaMelo Ball, Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard, Jalen Brunson, Trae Young, Kate Cunningham, Tyrese Maxey, Jordan Poole, Tyler Hero, Derek White, all these guys have had great seasons. Darius Garland should be on this list, don't get me wrong, but when you look at how many different guards and how many different more points they're scoring and how many more minutes they're playing because of the minute allocation that the Cavs are using to try and get everybody to the 82 game mark and further into the playoffs, that's not their priority. So the better option for the Cavs, or the most likely option to me, is Jared Allen when it comes to having a third All-Star because of who's in the front court. Obviously, you have Giannis, Jason Tatum, Karl-Anthony Towns, but you also have guys like Paolo Banchero, who've been hurt all season. You have Franz Wagner, who will be out for a majority of the season with a torn oblique. You also have Joel Embiid, Paul George, guys that don't play back-to-backs. So you look at where the lists stand currently, and it's looking like realistically the Cavs will have 2 All-Stars, but they could sneak in a third down the line.
All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I was here watching the Gilbert Arenas show, and he was talking about Imani Bates, which just scored 30 points against the Lakers. He has that quick release. And one of the guys on the show was asking why wasn't he playing? And he said, well, the Cavs are very ignorant because this guy, Gatorade Player of the Year, he's 6'9" with the quick release. They need a small forward. So, yeah, it's perplexing. He should be playing, but he's 6'9". They need length. Thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Ethan, they're 29-4. Whose minutes is he going to take? But it does, and the answer here isn't Imani Bates, but it does bring up a question. If everybody's healthy, who do you think is the starting small forward? And they see Bates practice. They keep an eye on the Cleveland Charge. If he was doing something that they thought would help him win, he'd be here yesterday.
I think it's unfair for Imani Bates to be getting this kind of look because of what he was as a prospect coming out of high school, coming into college, then coming into the NBA. He's just 20 years old, if I recall, and he's coming off a injury where he had to have surgery. He's just getting back into the flow of things. And the other thing is, when you talk about, you're absolutely correct, minutes. Whose minutes is he going to take? Sam Merrill's losing minutes. Ty Jerome's losing minutes. This is without Isaac Okoro on the floor right now, ladies and gentlemen. And if you want to talk about 6'9" small forwards, that's who I'm going with as my small forward, who I think the Cavs should start at the small forward for the remainder of the season. That's Dean Wade, 6'9.5", being able to play alongside Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. He has NBA, an NBA resume that shows that he can play at that level. Imani Bates, sure, put on 26 pounds of muscle, all those other things this past offseason. Great. Developing, all those good things. But can he defend? Is he just a shooter? What are those different things? When you look at Dean Wade, he is a 3-and-D guy who doesn't need the basketball all that. He takes low volume amount of shots. He is able to spread the floor still. He has gravity. And then he's one of the best defenders in the NBA. He might not get the credit for it that he deserves. He might not make an all-defensive team in his entire career. But teams know that Dean Wade is a menace on that side of the ball. When you talk about guys who have a high defensive rating, Dean Wade is a 104.2. I believe that would make him, if the Cavs had that for the remainder of the season or remainder of when they're on the court, they would have the second best defense in the entire NBA. Here are some stats for you when it comes to Dean Wade and why I think he should be the starting small forward going forward. The Cavs are now 89-33 with Dean Wade on the floor since trading for Donovan Mitchell. They are 39-36 without him in that span, which is a 43-win pace. And if you remember what I said earlier in the show, the Cavs are on a 72-game winning pace. They are 23-1 with Dean Wade on the floor this season. Ladies and gentlemen, they've lost 4 games. 3 of them came without Dean Wade on the floor. Then you speak of playing teams like the Los Angeles Lakers, the Denver Nuggets, the Milwaukee Bucks, the New York Knicks, even Philly, teams with a substantial big and other large wings, especially when discussing how Kenny Atkinson splits the minutes of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, as I mentioned earlier. Although Allen can protect the paint on his own, having Dean Wade as an option to slide as the power forward or small forward alongside George Niang gives the Cavs more defensive versatility with Wade's ability to guard 1 through 5 without decreasing their spacing on the offensive end. And then if you're going to say, oh, what about Max Strus? Sure. He was supposed to be the small forward coming into the season. He's been hurt. He was hurt for the first 27 games. Now he's back. You got to see against the Los Angeles Lakers how impactful he can be off the bench. 15 points, 5 triples, even though he's on a minute restriction, which is going to be lifted soon. He showed his impact off the bench, and it adds another weapon in Kenny Atkinson's tool belt for options to go to in late game scenarios with another starter caliber player able to stifle and overpower opposing benches. You talk about having Karis LeVert, Ty Jerome, Max Strus, all options off the bench or players that could start in the fourth quarter instead of Dean Wade, depending on what the game calls for. And that goes back to what I said earlier about Kenny Atkinson making in-game adjustments on the fly that are so important.
I'm with you. And again, Imani Bates, young guy, let him develop. Let's see if he can earn his minutes in the NBA. Ethan, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
Ethan Sands, make sure you check him out. Great Cavs coverage for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.